What's up, everybody? This is Trey Biddy with HawgSports.com, HawgSports.com. A lot to get to today. Arkansas has a big game against Mississippi State on Saturday. We're going to dive in with Paul Jones from Gene's Page 24/7, the Mississippi State site on 24/7 Sports, to get a little bit more insight on this matchup. We're also going to talk with Danny West because Arkansas got a big commitment from Isaiah Sategna, the top-rated commitment in the class. All that and more on Hawg Sports Live. All right, everybody, this, of course, is your Arkansas versus Mississippi State primer. Plenty of ways to watch and listen to the show. If you haven't followed us on Facebook, become one of 80,000 Razorback fans to follow the page and let other people know about the show. Share it, do all those things. Also available on YouTube. Follow the page on YouTube. Subscribe to the page, I should say. Hit the notifications bell so you're notified anytime we upload new videos. Also, share with your buddies. Also available on Apple Podcasts. Throw us that 5-star review if you haven't taken a moment to do that, and say something nice about the show. Also available on Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, anywhere else you can think of to find your favorite podcast. Hawg Sports is just $1 right now for your first month. HawgSports.com. Be sure to sign up for our breaking news text alerts. If you had breaking news text alerts, you would have known the moment that Isaiah Sategna committed to Arkansas, as well as any kickoff time. We don't spam you with anything like that. We just give you the breaking news. Also, sign up for our newsletter for free Razorback content delivered to your email inbox each morning, along with any other breaking news. Okay. As I mentioned, we're going to get to Paul Jones over at Gene's Page. He's going to give us a little bit of insight on Mississippi State, and we're going to talk to Danny West a little bit, and we'll answer your questions as well. So just jumping right into it with Isaiah Sategna. And again, we'll talk to Danny probably after Paul. We talked to Paul, but he's 5'11", 170-pound, number 133 ranked prospect in the country on 24/7 Sports. This is a guy who puts up just absurd track numbers. I mean, he's a 24.5-foot long jumper, 6'6" high jump. These are numbers from 2019 also. 14.6 seconds in the 100-meter and 110-meter hurdles. 37 in the 300, 37.67 in 300. Personal best, again, this is 2019 where this number's coming from. 10.8 in the 100 meters. Okay, 21.9 in the 200 and 49.5 in the 400 meters. So this is a guy that Gabe Brooks projects as one day to be somewhere within the 4th to the 7th round in the NFL draft. He thinks he has that type of potential. So nice pickup. He was once committed to Texas A&M. And then most recently committed to Oregon, and now he's committed to Arkansas. Okay. So we'll get into that a little bit more with Danny West, but just the significance of it, Arkansas now has the top 8 commits in the class. The top 8, recruits in the class. That's Isaiah Sategna, Andrew Chamblee, Amarian Harris, Quincy McAdoo, James Joyner, Manny Powell, who's actually from Ohio but moved to Fayetteville, Dax Courtney, and Nico DeVilliers. That's the top 8 in the class right now that they've offered, and they have 10 total. So we don't want to go without mentioning J.J. Hollingsworth out of Greenland, who's ranked number 11th in the class, and Caden Henley out of Shiloh Christian in Springdale, who's number 14 in the class. So that's where things stand right now. Razorback recruiting. Arkansas ranked 19th in the country right now. Now, there are some other schools to watch that are behind Arkansas. South Carolina at 21 only has 17 commitments. Florida at 22 with 13 commitments. Oklahoma State with 15 commitments at 28. Ole Miss with 15 commitments at 30. Mississippi State with 17 commitments at 31, and Tennessee with 14 commitments at 32, and Auburn with 13 commitments at 34. So those are programs that I would say have a chance to catch Arkansas just based on the fact that they don't have a whole lot of commitments, and traditionally they recruit at a pretty high level. So Arkansas is going to have to continue to add commitments. We know that Warren Thompson counts against this class, and then really it's just about how many spots they have available because of super seniors and things like that. So, I think it's interesting to look at this also when you take into account what Arkansas has done in recruiting. And Razorback fans, and I get it, lose it when a top recruit inside the state goes out of state. But, look at Mississippi. And one of the reasons people will say, when Arkansas was really, really down, Chad Morris years, last year, Brett Bielema, when they would rank the top jobs in the SEC, and a lot of times they put Mississippi State and Ole Miss ahead of Arkansas as a top job because of the recruiting territory, because there's a lot of recruits. But first of all, Mississippi State and Ole Miss got a They got to split those commitments, right? Or split those top recruits. But if you go back and look, like this year, 2022, you got to go down to the number 4 ranked player in Mississippi before there's a commitment to Ole Miss or Mississippi State. Number 4, number 5 are both committed to Ole Miss. The top are Georgia, Alabama, Miami. So, I mean, like, they really have to battle a lot of schools. You look at 2021, LSU, Alabama, Oregon. Those are the top 3 commitments out of the state of Mississippi. 2020, Texas A&M, Mississippi State, number 2. Auburn, Kentucky, Mississippi State, number 5. Ole Miss at number 6 with their highest rated commitment from the state. 2019, Georgia, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, Auburn, Mississippi State, Alabama, Auburn, Alabama, Auburn. You know, I mean, so like there's a lot of – I mean, you have to go back to 2018 before the top-rated commit out of the state of Mississippi went to a Mississippi school. So, good job. I mean, and it's like that all over the country. If you look at Arkansas, like from a ratio standpoint, they're getting the guys inside the state that they offer. Go look at like Pennsylvania or, you know, just about any state in the country, and you'll find that Arkansas is one of the top at keeping the in-state guys inside the state. So, how to watch Arkansas versus number 17 Mississippi State. They came in at number 17, which I thought was a little bit of a surprise to see them that high. I thought Arkansas had a chance to be in there, and Mississippi State probably somewhere in the 20s. But number 17 on the college football playoffs poll is where Mississippi State is at. 5-3, 3-2 in the SEC for Mississippi State. Arkansas at 5-3, 1-3 in the SEC. Saturday, November 6th at 3 p.m., SEC Network, Donald W. Reynolds Razorback Stadium. 5.5-point favorite for Arkansas. Arkansas is favored by 5.5 points. You can read about all, you know, how to watch radio affiliates, all that stuff on HawgSports. But Mississippi State and Arkansas in their second year with their coaches, Mike Leach and Sam Pittman. CBS Sports came out with their top, they ranked all 130 teams. They had Arkansas at 31 and Mississippi State at 33. Now, what I think is interesting about these two teams, like when you look at them from a recruiting standpoint, they are very, very similar. I mean, like year after year, both of them are like right next to each other. I think 2018 Arkansas had number 45 ranked class, but every other year it's like they're both in the 20s somewhere, like right by each other. So pretty evenly matched when you consider that. And you also look at the transfer portal, the help that they've got there. Arkansas, I think, brought in like 6 or 7 guys from the transfer portal. Several of them are playing a key role for Arkansas. Same way with Mississippi State. They got 2 wide receivers from the transfer portal who are starting for them. Cornerback, I believe a defensive tackle. Their backup quarterback came out of the transfer portal also. So, I mean, when you look at it like that, it's like very evenly matched. And there are certain things that this game's going to come down to. And I know we all look at the Kentucky game and say, okay, what was it, 31-10 or something like that? I think I stopped watching after it got 31-10 or so in the fourth quarter. In my rewatch, I watched it live, but I watched the whole game again yesterday, and I'm just thinking like, okay, like where was the mishap here for Mississippi State, or excuse me, for Kentucky? And it comes down to mistakes. And like Mississippi State fans might listen to this like, oh, here we go, you know. This game is about mistakes. And what Mississippi State has shown is they will capitalize on your mistakes. That's what this game is all about, especially when you're talking about evenly matched teams. It's about capitalizing on the other team's mistakes and limiting your own mistakes. And if you look at this game, you know, Kentucky's driving, I believe maybe the first drive, and they throw an interception right around the goal line. Okay, it was a deep ball, but they throw an interception right around the goal line, costing them points. All right, the end of the half, at the end, like around the last play, I guess it was the last play for Kentucky. I'm not sure. Mississippi State ran a couple plays or something, but they're driving, they're in field goal range, and they throw a pick right at like the 2-yard line. Okay, that's the last play for Kentucky at the end of the half. Okay, the next drive, they come back in the third quarter, and there's an interception or a fumble, and then there's an interception or a fumble. I can't remember which one, but there's 3 turnovers in a row, and that third quarter for Kentucky was a complete disaster. And they kept turning the ball over. They had 4 turnovers in the game. Okay? I mean, Mississippi State capitalized on all of those, and they're all in the third. The next 2 turnovers in the third quarter are, you know, in Kentucky territory, and Mississippi State made them pay for it. And that's what this game comes down to so often is the mistakes. So, you know, we can talk about like keeping everything in front of you. Obviously, that's important. Obviously, you would hope that Will Rogers is at 90-something percent completion percentage. I would say the odds are dramatically stacked against that happening, but he's still 75%, and that's pretty darn good for the year. So it's, keeping it, tackle well, keeping things in front of you, all those things, but the mistakes, the penalties, the turnovers, special teams, all of those things. And they gave up a punt return for a touchdown. Mississippi State did early in the game. I just think all of those things are so significant, and we talk about it all the time, and like keys to victory, and we do that story every week, and it's always going to be penalties, turnovers, special teams. Those kind of penalties, turnovers, special teams are always going to be a big factor in that, and that's one reason Mississippi State was successful. And that's not me saying like anything negative, but people will take it that way. But that's what it takes to win in this conference, especially when there's evenly matched teams. When they make a mistake, you make them pay. And Kentucky fans are sitting there right now saying, we shot ourselves in the foot. No, you didn't. You made mistakes, and Mississippi State made you pay for them. So this is a huge game for Arkansas at home. I mean, you lose this one, you're talking about losing back-to-back games at home in the SEC. That's not a good look. I go back and look. I watched a good part of that Auburn game, and it's just a few things here and there where, mistakes, penalties, and, big penalties and mistakes. Like, when I say penalties, that's also like getting bad calls against you. And I know like you can't talk about the referees because that has nothing to do with it. You're going to tell me that 3rd and 6 where Arkansas had to have it and they get a bogus pass interference call, the ball's 7 yards, 7 feet out of bounds. I guess there's no way a 6-foot wide receiver is catching that ball, and Arkansas gets a penalty flag on a 3rd down and 6 where they had to have a stop. That's not going to impact the game. You can't talk about that. The fumble, there wasn't a fumble again. I mean, there's a lot of things. I'm not saying that like those things go the other way. There's also another pass interference call that I thought was a phantom call. But I'm not saying those things would have resulted in an Arkansas win, but it would have changed a lot and given them a better chance to win. Arkansas is healthy, rested, about as healthy as they've been since week 1. Mississippi State's been in the grind of it. And we talked a little bit about that on Monday's show, but how big of a factor does that play? Would you rather be the well-rested, completely healthy team that's really had a couple of light weeks versus the team that's been in the grind of it and coming off wins against Vanderbilt and Kentucky? Again, we're going to get to your questions. I'm going to get with Paul Jones here, maybe a little bit earlier than I told him. But I want to get to Paul Jones over at the Mississippi State site. He's the co-publisher at Gene's Page. Does a good job over there. For those who want to follow or see what Paul is saying, maybe during the game, you like to follow that kind of stuff, it's at PJ247 Sports on Twitter. And he's been with the Mississippi State site, covering Mississippi State athletics for a number of years.
Hello.
Mr. Jones, how you doing?
Doing great.
For those of you listening in, again, we're with Paul Jones, co-publisher at Gene's Page 24/7. Follow him at PJ247 Sports. Paul, I wanted to just jump right into it with you. What is going on right now at Mississippi State? How do you feel like they are from a health standpoint? We've been talking a lot about Arkansas coming off, 2 pretty easy weeks, a bye week and a UAPB week, versus Mississippi State. The one thing that you kind of see that contrast here is Mississippi State coming off of back-to-back wins, 3 straight weeks. This will be, I guess, the 4th week in a row versus Arkansas having a little bit of time off. How do you see that dynamic playing out?
I think a lot of it has to do with their play lately. It's just playing clean football, Trey. And, that I know it sounds simple enough, but that's been the huge difference in their wins and losses, and even in the narrow win against Louisiana Tech to open the season. I mean, when they play clean football, and what I mean by that is winning the turnover margin and not giving points away, they've been very good this year, especially against Texas A&M, Kentucky, and North Carolina State. I think another factor has just been the maturation of the offensive players, mainly quarterback Will Rogers. I think he's making a lot smarter reads now with the ball, and that includes pre-snap reads where he sees what the defense is lined up in. And, of course, a lot of that is zone defenses with the air raid offense, and he's going to the run game more. We saw that last week against Kentucky. I think that was the best balance that Mike Leach has had with his offense at Mississippi State. My numbers may be off one or two, but I believe 39 passes, 34 rushing attempts, and that was unheard of a year ago. While these guys were trying to learn the system and playing a true freshman quarterback in Will Rogers, and I think it's always dangerous, Trey, to compare games to last year. Especially since it was a COVID year last year and things were weird altogether. But you look at the difference in their games, especially their offense this year, against Texas A&M and Kentucky. Those two teams completely shut down Mississippi State's offense last year, and a big culprit was the interceptions. I think Mississippi State threw, 4 interceptions, 3 or 4 last year against Texas A&M, and had 6 interceptions in the loss to Kentucky. And you look at this Arkansas game last year, was it 3 or 4 interceptions as well in that game? So, it comes down to playing clean football for this offense because, let's face it, the air raid offense is not a offense where they throw 50-yard bombs every play. It's got to be clean. It's got to be precise. The wheel has to be accurate because it's really a ball control offense, Trey. I mean, they have to complete 10 or 11 passes in a drive because most of them are 5-6 yard dump offs to either the slot receiver sitting in the zone or running backs out of the backfield. So to me, that's going to be the key to watch on Saturday.
I think what Will Rogers has shown is that you can't just drop 8. And Kentucky brought some pressure every once in a while, but most of it was just dropping 8. And, I was talking with our listeners just a second ago, and, you go into that, like right before half, Kentucky throws that interception. They have a chance to make a big play there. They throw the interception, and then they have 2 turnovers in the third quarter, so that's like 3 straight turnovers. But this is a 10-14 game in the third quarter, and you come out of the third quarter, and it's 31-10. And it's Mississippi State capitalizing on Kentucky's mistakes, and that's such a big part of this one. I wanted to jump into just kind of we did the 5 questions exchange, so I just want to go over that for the listeners that haven't read that. But can you update us real quick on the injury situation at Mississippi State?
Well, last week they had a few guys out, and one guy we're not sure of is starting right guard from Travius Johnson. He goes by the nickname Dollar Bill, and that's what we call him over here is Dollar. But Cole Smith, the former LSU transfer, he actually started against Arkansas last year at center, but they moved him more to guard this year. No reason given, which isn't a surprise for Mike Leach, but not sure if it was COVID related or injury or what the deal. I would be surprised if he returned this week. I don't think it's a long-term deal, but that's one to watch at right guard. It may be Cole Smith starting again. Brandon Ruiz, solid kicker. He has not been healthy. I think he missed 3.5 games, and since he's come back, he hasn't been completely healthy, but he's about the best option they have. And, he's been their kickoff guy, their field goal guy, and since he's come back, he really hasn't handled many kickoffs, and they kind of taken those duties away from him to, I don't know if it's his back or, a pull going or what the deal is with him, but he's not healthy, and the coaches have mentioned that he's trying to get back. And they say with Ruiz, it's really not even a game-by-game situation. It's a kick-by-kick situation to see how he's feeling. So a lot of that, Trey, is determined in warm-ups and how he's feeling. So that's another one to watch. But, the only guy they missed last week, Trey, was starting safety Fred Peters. But it wasn't injury-related. He became a dad last Saturday, so he was absent for that game. But he's expected to be back this weekend. Yeah,
I think we can excuse that. So we talked a little bit about about Will Rogers. So I don't want to go into that one too much because obviously he's really kind of coming into his own. But one of the questions I asked you was, what is the biggest difference with Mississippi State, aside from Will Rogers, last year versus this year? And they did some really good work in the transfer portal. I think 7 players out of the transfer portal, including 4 guys who are starting for Mississippi State.
Yeah, I kind of go back to guys just getting more reps and more experience. But they did hit a home run, if you will, in the transfer portal when you look at the guys they brought in. Obviously, Mekhi Polk's the biggest name you're going to mention because he leads SEC in receiving and catches, and I think he's fifth in yards. But, Jameer Calvin, another transfer receiver, he's had some moments this year. Randy Charlton is a starting defensive end transfer from Central Florida. They've had so many guys just to impact right away. I think another key factor, and I believe you've seen this same thing with Sam Pittman at Arkansas, man, it's just that mindset of learning how to win games. That can be difficult when your program's been down and you've had a couple losing seasons. Just getting guys to learn how to win and just step up and make a play. You mentioned the game last weekend. The interception off the tip pass that Jalen Green caught right before half. That's stepping up and making a play that can help determine the outcome of a game. And you've got to have that more and more in the SEC because, man, you know better than anybody, games are so close in the SEC. And you may make a play that wins the game in the first quarter, or it could be on the last play of the game, but there's going to be 3 or 4 plays in most SEC weekends to determine, whether you win or lose.
Paul Jones joining us again, co-publisher at Gene's Page 24/7, PJ247 Sports on Twitter. So I want to ask you this. What is the secret for Arkansas, you think? What does Arkansas have to do to beat Mississippi State on Saturday?
If there's been a weakness to Mississippi State's defense, it's been allowing those big plays in the secondary. I mentioned that in our swap questions, and it seems like it's reared its ugly head in just about every game, even their blowout wins. Like I mentioned, they had no problems with Vanderbilt, which everybody can say this played them this year, I guess, except South Carolina. But even in that game against Vanderbilt, one of their field goals came off of a 61-yard pass, and LSU killed them deep. You look at Texas A&M; they had some deep shots in that game, and obviously Alabama had a field day against their secondary. I mean, that's been the Achilles heel of the defense because the run defense has been pretty good, and we know that's going to be an interesting matchup this weekend because I think Arkansas ranks 4th nationally in rush offense, and Mississippi State ranks 4th nationally, I think, in run defense. So I know that matchup will get a lot of attention. But to me, for Mississippi State, it's about limiting the big plays and not letting KJ Jefferson beat you with his arm. He's going to run the ball. He's going to have that presence in the run game, but they cannot allow those deep shots down the field.
And I'll get you out with this one, Paul. How do you see this one playing out? Do you have a score prediction you'd like to give?
Man, I could go with a 3-point win for either team, and I could be talked into that. I really do believe we'll see a close game. And, of course, saying that, it'll probably be a 35-point blowout for somebody. But, I think these teams are evenly matched. I know they do things differently as far as from an offensive standpoint, but, I think you look at the strong points for both teams, and the other side matches up well with that. We just mentioned the run offense and the run defense, where you can say the same thing. Mississippi State has the number 1 passing offense, which is clear with the air raid offense. You're going to be number 1 probably most years. But, Arkansas is 2nd in SEC in pass defense. So, I mean, there's a lot of good matchups on paper to where I think this game should be a 4-quarter game. And, Mississippi State has played well on the road. They've had some hiccups on the road too, obviously with the loss of Memphis, but they won at Texas A&M, obviously won at Vanderbilt, but still, winning at A&M in front of that crowd, over 100,000 people, that says a lot about their ability to block out the noise and to overcome adversity because, Arkansas is going to have that home field advantage and the crowd's going to be into it, and, Arkansas is going to make a run at some point, and they're going to have good plays. How quickly can you overcome adversity? But I'd be surprised if this wasn't a 4-quarter game.
Yeah, I think you're right. And turnovers, penalties, special teams going to play such a big role in this one, I think. And I mean It should be I mean, when you look at these they do things so much differently, but when you look at recruiting rankings, they're always right by each other the last 5 years or so. But they do things differently. But I really think turnovers, penalties, special teams, a bad call here and there, or something like that could determine the outcome in this one.
I agree, and Mississippi State obviously, Burks is going to get his. I think State's got good cornerbacks, but it's like somebody pointed out on our message board this week, and it's so true. Burks makes plays when he isn't even open,
mm-hmm.
So he's going to be a factor. The key is to not let other guys beat you as well.
Yeah. All right, Paul. Well, I appreciate you, and will we see you this weekend? You heading to Fayetteville?
No, we'll not be. We've such a long trip. We'll have
mm-hmm.
somebody there. We'll have a couple of people there covering, but getting close to that carryover between basketball and football season.
I hear you.
I know you're ready for that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Paul, appreciate you, man.
All right, man.
All right, everybody. That's Paul Jones again. You can follow him at PJ247 Sports on Twitter, and he is the co-publisher over at Gene's Page, which is the Mississippi State site that covers the 24/7 site that covers Mississippi State. Okay, now I want to jump over to Danny West. Danny had a busy week with the commitment of Isaiah Sategna, as we mentioned, the highest-rated commitment in the class for Arkansas, committing Wednesday night, flipping from Oregon. Also a big recruiting weekend coming up. Arkansas, the only school in the SEC in the month of October that did not have an official visitor, by the way. Danny, how you doing?
Trey Biddy, what's going on?
Oh, not much. I'm just letting everybody know about what happened with Isaiah Sategna, and I guess starting off, what are your thoughts on the significance of that commitment? And I'll just let you take it.
Yeah, I mean, it was big, from even a perception standpoint. You're looking to try to get the number one player in the state, of course. He's basically turned you down twice, committed to two other schools, and came full circle back around to you. So that was good. I think they've missed on the last 3 out of the 4 years number one players in the state,
mm-hmm.
or he would have been the 3rd out of 4. So, that's a good trend to see come to an end. Then, of course, the rankings aspect of it. You're trying to avoid a complete slide here towards the end. And
right.
The numbers have a lot to do with that, of course. They're low on numbers this year. But, a big-time pickup. Isaiah, you got to give a lot of credit to Kenny Guyton here.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he gets enough credit. That was a tough flip, and he made it happen.
For those of you who don't follow Danny, you can follow him at DannyWest247 Sports. Most of his content is VIP, which means you need a subscription, and HawgSports is just $1 right now for your first month, HawgSports.com. So, Danny, what's next? What do you think is next for Arkansas's class? They have 20 commitments right now, 21 counting Warren Thompson, who counts against the class. And we don't know really how many more that they could sign in this class. It depends, as we were talking earlier, on super seniors and things like that. So what do you think is next for this 2022 class?
Yeah, I think they've got eight guys for next year that could potentially come back and count against your 85. We can name them real quick: Fouché, Bumper, Buster Brown, Traylon Smith, Shane Clennon, Dalton Wagner, John Ridgway, and Jordan Silver. So, you got to wait until after the season to give those guys time to make their decision and see which way that falls. So until that happens, it's hard to really know exactly how much room you've got. But to answer your question, I think if they really love somebody in this class,
mm-hmm.
It'd have to be one that they really, really love. But I do think they would make room for, 1 to 2 more if they were, so fortunate to get a couple of these guys down the final stretch. And, I think it'd have to be like 4-star type guys, So from a rankings perspective, I did a little research on this. You really need a couple of more 4-stars, to be honest with you,
mm-hmm.
If you want to stay in the top 25, and all teams do, because there's so many teams behind you right now. They've only got 13, 14, 15 commitments.
Florida, Auburn, Tennessee. There's a lot of schools that recruit at a high level that don't have a lot of commitments right now.
Yeah, that traditionally pass Arkansas,
mm-hmm.
and probably will again unless Arkansas can somehow add to what they've got. I've been a little surprised that they're going over 20, or
mm-hmm.
it appears to be. So Maybe they'll find the room somewhere. But it's like Coach Pittman said a couple of weeks ago, if you love them, you take them right now and kind of worry about the numbers later on. I think that's where they're at.
And Arkansas this weekend, going to have some visitors, and finally you don't have an 11 o'clock game, and you're at home. This is breaking the streak of 5 straight games at 5 different locations, 4 straight 11 o'clock games with the 3 o'clock kickoff. So you expect to get some guys from Louisiana, from Texas, and things like that, and including a lot of 2023 guys and a lot of guys that are on their second or third visit.
Yeah, it's an impressive list we've got started there on HawgSports. We'll continue to add to that list, as needed throughout the week. But you want to run through a few names here or what?
Yeah. Let's talk about some of these guys. I mean, especially the ones coming for their second or third visit, because that's, as we know, always very notable.
That's right. Well, I'll start with Brendan Jordan making his 3rd trip, actually 4th if you want to count his. I think it was their season opener. They came up from Mansfield, Texas, and they played at Bentonville West. I actually attended that game, so they actually practiced on Arkansas's practice field before that game. So if you want to count that as a visit, you can. That would be his 4th. But, it's a 4-star safety in the 23 class, 6 foot, 185. He's number 189 in the country. Big-time talent there. You've got the linebacker. Let me find him here, Everett Rousseau, out of Ellenwood, Cedar Grove, Georgia. He came up in June, obviously a teammate of Rashad Dubinion, who's committed in this year's class. You got Drew Pickett, a running back out of Alabama, 2023 3-star, really good-looking player there. Tackett Curtis is a 4-star linebacker out of Manny, Louisiana, making his 2nd trip up here. And the list goes on and on. We added another last night. Robert Stafford is a 23 athlete out of Florida. That's a long way. So a lot of these guys are making a long trip. As you mentioned there, some of them for their 2nd, 3rd time. That's something I'm going to try to start tracking, to be honest with you, because I do think it's a really good data point.
Well, I remember, Danny, when KJ Jefferson came, and you had him listed like KJ Jefferson coming, and I was like, didn't he come? And he was like, he came already, right? And it's like, oh, this guy, crystal ball time.
Yeah, buddy.
Yeah, you start coming on those multiple visits, then you know something's up. So that's usually a good indicator. All right, Danny, you want to talk about Mississippi State real quick? What do you think? You're a little nervous about this one for Arkansas?
Yeah. I'm a bit nervous about this one, Trey. I worry about the defense, the back end of the defense. Of course, ever since Catalan, he's kind of your great neutralizer, or was. He make up for so many mistakes, get people in the right place. And so, this is Mike Leach we're talking about, dude. He's one of the greatest offensive guys of all time. Arkansas really doesn't have a pass rush at all to speak of, and they've gotten torched. Really the last 2 SEC outings. I won't count Georgia. Georgia didn't have to throw it,
Yeah.
So you think about the last 2 specifically, they gave up an average of 74% completion, an average of 290 per game, 4 touchdowns and 1 pick combined. They gave up over 53% on all 3rd down attempts, 100% in the red zone. 6 of 6 with 5 touchdowns and a field goal. You see where it's going here. They're really struggling.
Stop.
Defense. Yeah. So
we don't want to hear that.
Right. Now you get Mike Leach and Will Rogers coming off a game, 36 of 39. Are you kidding me? And that's a really good team they beat, by the way. I've been impressed with Kentucky, and that was up there for me, Trey, as far as surprises of the season so far, right up there with A&M beating Alabama.
It didn't help Kentucky.
Really
Kentucky turned the ball over 3 times in a row, right at the end of the 2nd quarter, and then a fumble and an interception. Going into that 3rd quarter, Danny, it was 14-10, and they'd lost a chance at points right before half, and then suddenly it's 31-10.
And got away from their running game,
Yep.
They had to. They're playing catch-up now. And so a little bit of the rush defense. Now, hey, I'm going to tell you, I think Mississippi State's got a really good defense, but I think all numbers are skewed at some point, right? And I think theirs is, a little bit. So it's not to say Arkansas is just going to go out there and gash them. I don't think that's going to be the case, but I like Arkansas's chances of just lining up, forcing the issue, and sticking with it. You've got to have power run this week. KJ Dominique and
Yep.
Sanders. That's what I would do. I'd try to run right at them.
Yeah, I mean, you got a 245-pound quarterback who can run. You got a 235-pound running back and a 225-pound running back. Just keep hammering with those guys, and maybe the second half is a good time to see a little bit of Traylon Smith after you've been pounding away at those guys. Bring in somebody who's a little shiftier, or A.J. Green as well. All right, Danny.
Got to pound with passion, Trey. You know what?
That's my line.
Sometimes in life.
All right, brother. Well, we'll see you this
you.
weekend. All right, man. Appreciate you.
All right, bye.
All right, everybody. That's Danny West again. You can follow Danny at Danny West 247 on Twitter. He does a great job covering Razorback recruiting, and of course, he's from Rising. He's grown up in Arkansas, following the Razorbacks his entire life, so he knows what he's talking about when it comes to the Hogs. All right, where are we going now? I want to talk actually a little bit about basketball, just a little bit, because we're about to be in full swing. The exhibition season is over. 24/7 Sports did this. Our man Eric Bossy said, college basketball preview, 10 second-year players in the nation poised to break out. And there is Devo Davis listed, 8.5 points, 4.5 rebounds, 2.1 assists per game. Why he could break out, Arkansas fans certainly know all about Devo, and so do those who paid close attention to the latter part of the SEC and NCAA tournaments. The rest of the nation is likely going to find out about Devontae Davis in short order, and then goes on to break out down, where he was in high school, where he was ranked, all that stuff, what his style of play is, all of those things. So it's a good read from Eric Bossy on 10 second-year players poised to break out. Everybody's on the Devo train right now. Next game up is Mercer, Tuesday, November 9th. So next week, early in the week, against Mercer at 7 o'clock on SEC Network Plus. So that means it's streaming. That's not SEC Network alternate channel. That means you need to stream the game on the ESPN app. So. And then Saturday, November 13th, which is the same day as the LSU game. The LSU game is at 6:30 in Death Valley, so they waited to schedule a time for this one. It is also on SEC Network Plus, so it is streaming at 2 o'clock from Bud Walton Arena. So that's what's up with Razorback basketball. Okay, questions. Who's got a question? Only good questions today. Before we get started with these questions, of course, I got to remind you one more time, plenty of ways to watch and listen. If you haven't thrown us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, that's all I'm going to say right now. I'm not going to talk about Facebook or YouTube or anything else, but if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, take a moment real quick, throw us a 5-star review, say something about the show, let other people know what to think. We've had some funny comments on our reviews, but we are right now the highest-rated show on, in relation to the Razorbacks on Apple Podcasts. We're certainly proud of that and want that to continue, but we need more 5-star reviews. So if you like the show, then throw us that 5-star review. We certainly appreciate that. All right, James Hill says, Trey, how are the freshman defensive linemen coming along? Really, I would say the only one, let me get this off of here. Really, I would say the only one that we've got a good sample of is Cameron Ball. They've been really pleased with him. I think we could possibly see more of him in the future. 6'5", 300-pound guy. So Lisa Cup Hancock's 5-year anniversary follower says, love the coverage. Isaiah, will you marry me? Oh, Lisa. 5-year anniversary follower Clint Stacy Patterson says, we need to win to have momentum for the end of the season. I mean, this is a big stretch right here. First of all, bowl eligibility is on the line. You win this one, you're bowl eligible. Right now, Arkansas is being projected by 24/7 Sports to play Michigan in the Outback Bowl. So I think we would all take that, a trip to Tampa. So you win this one, you get eligible. Things shape up nicely for that LSU game. LSU can be had. It's not going to be easy. It's never easy in Death Valley, but they can be beaten, and then Arkansas should be favored to beat Missouri and end this ridiculous streak against Mizzou. I mean, it's just – that's the saddest thing out of all this. The Arkansas, I can understand losing to Texas A&M 9 times in a row in Arlington as much as you don't like it. But losing to Missouri 5 times in a row is just pathetic. And that, I don't mean that anything against Missouri specifically. Sure, they can beat Arkansas now and then, but 5 in a row. Clint Stacy Patterson says, I just read that. Matt A. Worley, 5-year anniversary follower, says, better start recruiting quarterback because Hornsby isn't the future. I think it's a little too early to call it on Hornsby. You know, he's a different kind of quarterback. I really like Lucas Coley. I think Cade Renfro has some positive attributes also. He can run the ball. He's got a really nice arm. So they're not bringing in a quarterback in this current class And obviously the transfer portal is always an option at quarterback, but they will obviously pursue that pretty heavily in 2023. And KJ Jefferson has 2.5, 3.5 years left if he wants it. George Ulmer says, Trey, how much do you think losing Catalon and before that him playing hurt our defense? I think it hurt. I mean, he's an All-American safety. Nothing's really getting past Catalon. He's not missing tackles. And I think Slusher has played below what he is capable of in replacing him. But he's not played really not close to that level yet. He's given up a couple big plays here and there, but I think he's better than that. Is he Catalon? Is his ceiling Jalen Catalon? I don't know about that, but it absolutely has hurt. I mean, a preseason All-American. Landon Montgomery says, does Hornsby transfer after this year? He's a huge talent. I would say that's too early. I don't really like to talk about players transferring until it becomes obvious or something, but he is the backup quarterback right now. But, I mean, players transfer all the time. I think it's good. What I think is good about Arkansas right now is nobody's transferred in season. You know, that's the thing I hate when players are like 4 games in, redshirt themselves, I'm transferring, I'm getting out of here. You're quitting on your team, you're hurting your depth. I don't like it. I don't like any player that comes to Arkansas that did that, and any player that leaves Arkansas that does that. Transfer in the offseason. There's a lot of talk about Malik Hornsby. Lee Barber says, milestone follower, says drop 8 works great against the air raid when Jalen Catalon's hit stick highlight reel is on the loop and the receiver's berth. I mean, it's going to be so like the play of the safeties, the corners, and not just like in coverage, but tackling. You know, keeping things in front of you, fighting through blockers, nickels. That's going to be so big in this game because they're going to throw a lot of screen passes. They'll run the ball some too. I mean, they ran the ball a pretty good bit against Kentucky and had success. But, I mean, so much of what Mississippi State does is tunnel screens to the running backs. And the running backs catch a ton of passes. So much of it is that they will throw over the middle. I mean, I say Will Rogers, like, you know, so many of his passes are like those gimme screens and stuff like that where they're almost a guaranteed completion. But he was throwing over the middle with success against Kentucky. So, I mean, that's going to play a factor too. But you got to keep stuff in front of you. Philip Warren says, can you explain how Arkansas and Mississippi State have the same record, the same signature win against A&M, and Mississippi State lost to Memphis, yet they are ranked number 17 when completely unranked? So stupid the disrespect will never end. I mean, it's kind of a what have you done for me lately deal. I mean, they've got Kentucky ranked. You know, they're looking at it and they say, okay, Kentucky's 6-2. We've got them ranked 18th. Can we put Mississippi State below them? I don't know about that. You know, I think it's just a what have you done for me. People forget Texas A&M. They forget about Texas, you know. Think about this. If Arkansas converts that 2-point play against Ole Miss and they're 6-2 right now, how different. How different. Just that one play. That one play. And Arkansas is in the teens right now in the college football playoff poll. TJ Wood says, love the show. Appreciate that, TJ. Shadrick White says we lost 3 in a row and our win streak on a win streak beating 2 ranked teams in A&M and Kentucky. Okay. That didn't read right for me for some reason. Philip Warren says, I get that, but if they're going to go 100% off recent bias, why shouldn't A&M be number 1 for beating Alabama? Well, I mean, there's a balance, I think. But, yeah, a lot of it is what you did for me lately, I think. Elder Regional Allen says, Trey, what's your score prediction? I think the Hogs win respectfully. So my score prediction, I think I'm probably going to be somewhere around 31-28 Arkansas. I think Arkansas is going to win the game, but it comes down to the small details, okay? Because I think they're pretty evenly matched overall, but it comes down to the small details. I think Arkansas being the home team is the reason I would give them the advantage. But, I mean, you can't turn the ball over 3 times in a row and expect to beat Mississippi State, especially in the third quarter. And that's what Kentucky did. You know, like people can talk about all these things, how dominant they were in this factor, and I'm not taking anything away from Mississippi State because they were. But they made them pay for their mistakes. Kentucky made too many mistakes, and Mississippi State capitalized every single time, whether it was stopping them from scoring, which happened twice down in Mississippi State territory, right around the goal line. They picked them off twice right down there. And then they had 2 other turnovers, you know, in their own territory. And Mississippi State went down and scored touchdowns. That's what it comes down to, man. I mean, it comes down to, and that's not taking anything away from Mississippi State because that's so often what happens in college football. Limiting mistakes, playing clean football, and making them pay when they do make a mistake. Keegan Gilliam says, why do you think it has taken 8 games for our coaching staff to decide on Johnson being the number 1 back? I have no idea. Kagan Gilligan is a 3-year anniversary follower. I have no idea. But this guy, I was going back and I watched, I guess, the first half of the Auburn game. I went back and watched 3/4 of the Mississippi State-Kentucky game yesterday, every play. And then I did the same thing with Arkansas-Auburn. And, I'm watching Dennis Johnson in the first couple runs that he made, and he's just like plowing for extra yardage, like moving the pile. And he's the best back Arkansas's got right now. Now, does A.J. Green and Rocket Sanders, do they have brighter futures? I don't know. You know who he reminds me of? You know who Dominic Johnson reminds me of? And some of you guys may remember him because he went crazy on Arkansas back in 2017. It's Cameron Petway for Auburn. Cameron Petway was basically unstoppable in that game against Arkansas, and had a great year. I think he ran for 1,200 yards, didn't play in a whole lot of games that year, left early. I think he might have got injured the next year, but left early, went undrafted. I don't think he ever played in the NFL, but he was 6 foot, 235, former fullback. It kind of reminds me a little bit, they tried to Dominic a little bit at tight end. That's who he reminds me of, Cameron Petway for Auburn. Hogtunes. I need a picture for HawgSports, Hogtunes. Hogtunes says, how does our defensive front match up with the Mississippi State O-line? DM me, Hogtunes, on Twitter. How does our defensive front match up with the Mississippi State offensive line? Well, they got one guy injured, but they do a good job protecting. Arkansas hasn't had any success really getting to the quarterback outside of Trey Williams, and he hasn't done anything in terms of getting to the quarterback in the last 3 games. But I still really love John Ridgeway. I like Utsey. I like Isaiah Nichols. Okay, but right now I'd probably give the edge to Mississippi State on the offensive line, just because they haven't had a whole lot of success. I think like a secret to getting to Mississippi State is going to be bringing a D back, dropping 8, and then just bringing somebody. Surprise, Isaac Riley says it'll make me feel better if we win Saturday. You and everybody else. Cedric White says Clark is a zone DB, so why they continue to put him in man coverage and he gets burnt. Yeah, he both of those guys have struggled. That's a big part of the game. Like, they need the best game out of Ladarius Bishop that they've had. And Bishop, I don't believe, played against Auburn. I believe it was Clark the whole game. Then he was back for UAPB. But they need, like, Hudson Clark, Ladarius Bishop both need to have their best games. I'm not going to say Hudson Clark needs to have his best game because that means 3 interception. He just needs to have a good game, a solid game. And Ladarius have his best game. I think Monteric matches up well for this one because he is a very physical cornerback. He can fight through people. He tackles well. So I think Monteric matches up well. Greg Brooks needs to come back and have a good game, or Jaden Johnson. Both of those guys, I would say, they probably play pretty similar amount of snaps. I kind of like Greg Brooks in this one because he was committed to Mississippi State previously, and that's going to add a little bit of extra motivation. He had a good game against them last year, and he has that experience. So, but they like Jaden Johnson, what he's done so far. Kyle Smith says, thoughts on Traylon Smith playing a role on kickoff and punt return? Right now, I'm fine with Perotti. They've tried so many guys back there. That just go with Perotti. He catches the ball, and that's good enough at this point because everybody else scares you to death. Unless it's Traylon Burks. Maybe Traylon Burks. We're talking about getting him more action. Okay, put him at punt return, kickoff return. Trying to figure out ways to get him the ball more. I don't know. I don't want to risk getting him injured anymore, I wouldn't guess. Kagan Gilliam, you butchered my name, Trey. I'm sorry, Kagan. Maybe a phonetic deal would help me. Marco Giles says, Trey, I wonder if you realize how many times you've called Dominic Johnson Dennis Johnson. Have I? I do that every once in a while. And to be honest with you, I think I feel a little groggy because the season's changed a little bit, but yeah, sorry about that, Dennis and Dominic, I guess. I'm good for a mistake every show, like just Barbara Blaine. And to be honest with you, I was like, man, I wonder if I could do this show Friday because I do not feel 100% right now. But you got to fight through it. You got to fight through it. Even when you don't feel 100%, you still got to get to the gym, right? Those are the days. Dominic Johnson. Barbara Blaine says, is one of our basketball players ineligible for the first few games of the season? I don't think so. I mean, it could possibly, if you're maybe Kamani Johnson. There we go. We're getting to that 50-minute mark. Rob Hopper says, Trey, I'm a gold star father because I lost my son, LCPL Brian Hopper in Iraq. Brian was a big Hog fan and would love to get one of the red, white, and blue Razorback decals. Do you have a suggestion how? Man, I do not. I do not know how to get that, Rob. I mean, you probably, and I hate hearing that story. That is absolutely terrible. Rob, I'm trying to think of who you might hit up. You can maybe hit up Kyle Parkinson, Sports Information Director at University of Arkansas. Maybe that would be somebody to contact. I hate hearing that, Rob. Thanks for sharing. Mark Douglas says, I assume Mississippi State game plan for the Dogs drop 8. I am hopeful we have some selecting good time wrinkles that disrupt the Mississippi State going to do it. You know, that's what Kentucky did. Kentucky dropped 8, and every once in a while they brought a blitz, and it was effective for a while. The thing that beat Kentucky was them making the mistakes on offense, turning the ball over 4 times. You just can't do that, and that's what cost them. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining me. I want to say thanks to Paul Jones from Gene's Page 24/7 for joining us from the Mississippi State site, and, of course, Danny West for his insight on Razorback recruiting, and, of course, the Isaiah Sategna commitment, which was huge for Arkansas. All right, we'll be back with you walking around the stadium on Saturday, potentially after a Razorback win or a loss. I think it's very close. I think it could be a very close game. So it should be interesting. 3 o'clock, SEC Network from Donald W. Reynolds Razorback Stadium. All right, everybody, thanks for joining me. This has been Trey Biddy with HawgSports.com, and we'll catch you next time.